welcome to episode 8 of the Ninten-Dadcast podcast. I've literally done this intro like 10 times now because of just having to cut, and it's one of those fun things when you film your podcast and everything. Your whole studio's in your house, and you have children, and you have dogs, and noisy things happen, and you have to constantly cut and re-edit and restart. So of course, when I have the room completely empty and there's complete silence, I bungle the opening. But I'm going to keep going because I'm tired of redoing this over and over again. So welcome to episode 8 of the Ninten-Dadcast podcast. This week we are talking about some sad news in the video game world. We're going to talk a little bit about the Bungie layoffs that just happened last week, as well as the closure of the last North America, or I should say U.S., I don't know about Canada, but the last U.S. Print media for video games. Game Informer, obviously, is what I'm talking about. They have shuttered their doors. For the last, I think, 15 years or so now, they've been owned by GameStop. It's been kind of a perk to their pro membership. You get your pro membership, you get your discounts and everything, and then you get a subscription to Game Informer magazine. They offered you a digital subscription or a physical subscription. The few times I've been a pro member, I've always opted for the physical membership because I always like having that physical video game magazine. So much so, like I've seen at a couple secondhand shops, I've seen like old EGMs, old Game Pros, old Nintendo Powers. I've been very tempted to buy them just to have them for that nostalgic thing. In fact, when I do my shopping on Surugaya, they have Nintendo 64 Dream as well as Famitsu magazines. I've always been tempted to order them and things like that, and I don't have it close by to grab, but I did get, if you watch the one unboxing, I did have the Chrono Trigger strategy guide that I got from Japan, just kind of a little cool. I just like those little like print media things for video games. They're always kind of fun to have around, very nostalgic kind of thing. But so Game Informer is no more. The website shut down. There'll be no more issues coming out. Sadly, everyone was laid off. In a tweet, though, by one of the executives, I guess they're working out severance packages, so that's at least good for those folks. But print media has been dying for a long time. I mean, if you are someone my age who used to go through the Sunday paper, like the Sunday paper was like that thick, it had so many ads in it, and now you look at like the Sunday paper now, if you even get a Sunday paper, most people don't, it's like that thin, you barely get any ads in it and thing like that. It's kind of really, it's sad in a way that print media has gone this way, but it's kind of a sign of the times. Most of us get our news and articles on one of these bad boys right here, or on our computer, and we just don't do the whole physical media anymore. I mean, like, my wife is an avid reader. Half her book collection's on a Kindle, and that's the way a lot of people do it. Shoot, I just do audiobooks because I don't really have the time to sit down and actually read a book anymore. Usually when I'm on long drives, I throw an audiobook on, and that's how I get my storytelling, through books. So yeah, print media, be it magazines, be it newspapers, be it books, kind of dying off, kind of a rare thing. Shoot, physical media in general, I mean, we've talked about that before on the podcast with DVDs and video games. They're moving to an all digital kind of thing. So I mean, I tend to still buy my games physically, as well as some of my movies, like movies I really, really like, I own a physical copy of. But I mean, there is something to be said for the convenience of digitally owning movies, where you don't have to get up and put a disc in. Same with video games. You just scroll through your menu, you click what you want to watch, want to play. It makes life so much easier. I know sometimes I'll be really lazy when I just want to relax and play a video game. It's like I'll play either whatever disc is already in the system, or play like a Game Pass game, even though like, I might want to play WWE 2K24. But right now, college football's in the Xbox, and I'm like, I don't really want to get up and switch discs. I'll just play college football, or I'll play whatever game on Game Pass that I'm going to try out. So it is sad with physical media going away. Game Informer was that last bastion holding on for print journalism for video games, and that is gone now. So sad for all those people who lost their jobs. Hopefully they bounce back. I mean, I'm sure some of them probably already have like online blogs, things like that for games journalism, and there's a lot of sites that pop up that maybe they can join things like that. So hopefully everyone lands on their feet with that. But yeah, so sad to see a print media go the way of the dodo. And next up to talk about is the whole Bungie, not kerfuffle, but Bungie layoffs right now with, Sony took them over and everything like that, bought them last year, 2 years ago. Time is a construct. I don't know anymore. For $3.6 billion, nearly $4 billion, which I thought was an absurd amount for them to pay for Bungie. And I also found it ironic because Bungie did so much. Like, they were originally kind of like I don't know if they were first party Xbox or second party Xbox back in the day, with Halo and everything like that. And they fought so hard for their independence, and they got it, and they started doing Destiny, and Destiny became expensive, so then they got bought out by Activision, and then once again they didn't want to be beholden to a larger publisher, so they fought for their independence. So I thought it was odd, only a few years after leaving Activision, that they again would be sold, and this time to Sony, and we're starting to learn why they were sold to Sony, because apparently Bungie made a lot of bad investments, bad fiscal maneuvering, and where they were sold for nearly $4 billion, they weren't worth like half that. They were in severe debt, and they needed to sell because otherwise they were going to close. So they did that, and the word was that they were going to do all these live service monitoring for Sony and things like that, kind of help Sony get these live service games off and running, like The Last of Us Online, which is now shut down. That new one that they've got, that's the Overwatch ripoff hero shooter. I can't think of the name of it, but apparently that was already in the works before Bungie came over, which is why that got released, because I remember watching Inside Games, Bruce talking about that. He was like, how did The Last of Us Online get shut down and this make it through? So... But apparently it was more Sony saving Bungie than Bungie doing a lot for Sony. So a lot of employees have been let go. Even more are just being enveloped into Sony Interactive. And then Bungie's going to kind of have like a skeleton staff now. And it's going to be really, really barren there. And it's one of those things, like, how long until Bungie's not even a company anymore? Bungie is just part of Sony Interactive, or just Bungie in name only. So it's kind of a sad thing to see that too, because you look at Bungie's pedigree. They come out of the gate hard. Well, they had Marathon on the Mac, but when Bungie really became a name, especially in console, I should say, because Marathon was a very popular Mac game, but they came out onto the console wars swinging with Halo. I don't know if there was. I can't think of as far as that generation, a new IP that debuted in that Xbox PS2 generation that really, really captured the zeitgeist. Trying to think of a PlayStation 2, if there was I can't think of anything on the PlayStation 2 that wasn't already established, your Final Fantasies, your Metal Gear Solids, things like that carried the banner into the PS2, PS3. But for Xbox, Halo, that was the killer app. That was what got a lot of people to buy an Xbox. And yeah, I can't think of a. In the PlayStation days, we got a couple new IPs that got their start, Grand Theft Auto got started on the PlayStation. But that was the last new IP that really, really became a cultural phenomenon, like Halo did. So Bungie came out of the gate swinging, new IP, and just boom, knocked it out of the park right away. And it took what GoldenEye and Doom 64 did right on the N64, and then just improved upon it with the dual sticks to make first-person shooters on consoles very, very doable and very, very mainstream at that point. Because before that, you had GoldenEye, you had Doom 64, but first-person shooters on the home console, weren't really a big thing like they are now. So without Halo, we're not having the yearly Call of Duty selling 30 million copies, things like that. We might not have, Fallout the way it is, BioShock, things like that. So Bungie and Halo are really to thank for that. And then, after they broke away after Halo Reach or 3, I can't remember which was first and last, but after those two Halo games came out on the 360, Bungie wanted independence. I don't think they wanted to do Halo anymore. They wanted to break away from that, and they had this big grand plan with Destiny. Like I remember when like Bungie was first talking about Destiny. I don't even think Destiny had a name yet. They were just talking about this massive 10-year long video game service, and games for service wasn't even like a term yet, but they were like, it's going to be a 10-year thing where we're going to add to it, we're going to update it, kind of like a World of Warcraft but first person shooters kind of thing. So when Destiny started, kind of a rocky start, but they kind of figured out and hit their stream. And I know so many people who like plan their lives around Destiny events. It's like, oh, there's this big raid thing happening, I've got to take out, like I've got one of my wife's best friends, her husband is a huge Destiny player, and they'll be like, we'll do get-togethers as families, like they'll come down here, we'll go up there, or we're supposed to meet someplace, and then her husband's like, oh, I can't do it, there's a big raid for Destiny. So I've got a couple fans like that, like when Destiny has a big event that they need to take time off work, they need to take time away from family, they've got to set aside for these big raids. And it's just kind of funny to me because I've never been that obsessed with a game. Like, in fact, I've never been beholden to a game. Like games with internal clocks that unless it's a handheld, drive me insane. Like I think Animal Crossing on the GameCube was the last internal clock game where I was like, oh shit, I gotta do this because I can only do it today or whatever. So that always makes me laugh. But yeah, Destiny was a huge hit, and was it before Destiny 2 or after Destiny 2? But right around Destiny 2, they broke away from Activision, and I am shocked that Activision let them keep the Destiny rights, because Activision, Blizzard, especially before Microsoft bought them, kind of jackasses about stuff like that. Like the fact that they said, hey, you can keep this IP. I'm sure there was a monetary buyout for that, but they kept the IP and they kept it going, and then apparently keeping it going is what got them in their financial troubles, and they needed a buyer, and Sony was that buyer, because Sony really, I don't know if it's Sony as a whole, like Sony Interactive, Sony Japan as a whole wants to get into this games as a service kind of thing, or if it's Sony of America, SECA, I think is what their acronym is, that wants this games as a service thing, which I feel is kind of a dying breed. Like all these new games as a service games just seem to be flopping. Because one, there's only so many games you can play, so trying to crack that market really tough. You got to come out with a killer app, like a really good game, and it doesn't seem like a lot of game makers, publishers, want to put the work in to come out with that great game. They are more or less, let's try to get something out on the market as fast as possible, and then we'll fix it along the way. Which, what cracks me up is, I guess it's technically a games as a service, but Mario Kart 8, or is it called Infinite on the Switch now? Whatever Mario Kart 8 is it came out on the Switch, and Nintendo has been supporting that ever since. And in fact, this past month was the first month it sold less than 1 million copies. So there's the downfall of Western civilization right there. Mario Kart 8 did not sell 1 million copies in 1 month. But yeah, so that's been kind of a live service game for Nintendo. But if you have the Nintendo expansion pack, which is like online, which has the N64, Game Boy Advance, Sega Genesis, and plus you get expansions for Animal Crossing, you get it for Mario Kart, and you get it for Splatoon, I think. So Nintendo continually supports that, and so technically live service, but you can either buy the expansion pass just for Mario Kart 8, or you can buy the overall $50 a year expansion from Nintendo and get all that stuff. So I like that model that Nintendo does. Not all the microtransactions and everything that come with live services games. I just don't think that's a lasting model. Fortnite aside, because that seems to be the only one really raking it in as far as live service seasons and just constantly having huge player base. Everything else seems to ebb and flow, where just Fortnite came up and it's just going that way, where all the other live service games, they come up, they drop, maybe a big series event comes up, and then it drops again. So it's just not a sustainable model, and now the market for that has become so saturated that it's like you have hardcore Destiny people, still World of Warcraft people, Fortnite people, Rainbow Six Siege people, and so on with all those other ones. So Sony wanting to bring Bungie in, who already had their live service game, to help them create more, I thought was a fallible thought process on Sony's part. Like, had I been Sony, I wouldn't have been worried about a live service game so much from Bungie at first. I'd want Bungie's expertise with first-person shooters, like, because in spite of what Xbox says, Call of Duty, I don't know if it's going to go away permanently from PlayStation, but if Xbox stays in the console sphere, I think you will see release first on the Xbox, timed exclusive, then go to PlayStation, and then new maps, new features, debut on the Xbox first, maybe PC first as well, then go to the PlayStation. So I think had Sony been more advantageous with their purchase of Bungie, they would have decided to use Bungie expertise with first-person shooters to try to maybe bring back Killzone, maybe create a new IP. Because I think if Killzone still has its fans, so, or maybe SOCOM, Navy SEALs. So I mean, if you bring back like a legacy first-person shooter that Sony doesn't really do anything with anymore, but you put the Bungie name making it, I think you have the recipe for success there. And then maybe you can turn that into a live service, not like an egregious live service, but with new maps, new DLC maps, and instead of making a new game every year like a Call of Duty, you update it with maps and DLC packs down the road. So you this game's going to last for X number of years, and every quarter, every couple months, we are going to put out new content that you can buy as a whole pack, you can buy piecemeal, and I think that would have been a better use of Bungie, because then you don't have to worry about the whole live service model. You can go back to the kind of old school first-person shooter model where you have the game come out and then you have optional season pass, or you can buy maps and then you keep the game going for a little bit longer after that, and then after maybe a couple years you give a sequel, especially if there's like a story mode. But if it's just like straight PvP kind of gameplay, maybe you do the Counter-Strike model where you just release new maps, new characters, new things like that, and it just goes on, new skins, it just goes on and on as a multiplayer shooter, and you do tweaks here and there to make the game, keep the gameplay fun, keep the graphics up, things like that. But that's not what Sony did. And it's kind of funny, for all the things Sony does right in the video game sphere, they do a lot of dumb things too, and they're just lucky that it doesn't blow up in their face, like it has for Nintendo in the past, for Sega, for Xbox. So Sony keeps trucking along, because they do put out good systems, they do put out good games, but it is one of those kind of funny things that they keep making these stupid moves and it doesn't blow up as bad as it has for other game makers. But yeah, so I think Bungie's going to go away eventually. It might not be this year, it might be next year or the year after that. And in fact, it might even be after Marathon comes out. Like, once Marathon comes out, Bungie might not be anymore, which I wonder what that will mean for Destiny. Destiny 2, I should say. If Sony just envelops Bungie into Sony, will we get any more support for Destiny, or will Destiny die on the vine like that? I mean, it's had a good run, so it's not like if they stopped supporting it tomorrow, it didn't make them money, it didn't have a good run, things like that. So it's just some interesting develops with Bungie and their management. I know a lot of people who got laid off tweeted about just how poor management was for Bungie. In fact, like, I think it's their CEO, one of their top executives, as the news of Bungie layoffs were happening, he bought like $2.3 million in classic cars, which I'm going to take kind of controversial point here. He bought it with his own personal money, so he can do whatever he wants with that. He's made that money. It's his right to buy those cars, but at the same time, maybe when your company's laying off a significant chunk of its workforce, probably shouldn't be making like these big public purchases like that. So, I mean, maybe just hold off on like the $1 million spending for at least a couple months. I mean, if you don't get that car now, you can get a similar car, December time, kind of thing like that. You don't have to get it now, because as someone who is worked in corporate America, I've definitely seen the likes of a caring CEO versus you're a cog in the machine. The company I'm currently with, we have been sold, we've merged again, and it's kind of funny, when we were the smaller company, like 500 or less employees, so our owner, CEO, I don't even think we were publicly traded. She like knew every employee's name. She knew your backstory, your history. Like, I only like spoke with her a couple times, but like she remembered like personal details about me. Like, and management was really good about letting her know like if an employee was going through a tough time. Because I remember, I think it was like 2 years before she sold the company, and she didn't sell it as like a get rich quick kind of thing like that. She was getting old. She wanted to retire. I mean, sell your company. I mean, retire to Florida. And so, yeah, I bring that up just to say, like, there are companies out there with good CEOs, bad CEOs. And, you know, she sold the company. And then, like, the newer company wasn't terrible. She stayed on for a year or two for the transition, stuff like that. So the new company wasn't terrible, but you joined a bigger company, so you became more of a cog. And then we merged with another company, and then even more of a cog, even less of an individual. You are definitely a cog for that. So, I mean, that's the way a lot of these big corporations are, and not all of them are like that. Like Satoru Iwata, and his book is, or the Iwata asks, the book is right there by GoldenEye Laserdisc, one of my favorites. I mean, he famously, when the Wii U was a disaster, instead of laying off a single employee, he took a massive pay cut. I thought he cut his salary in half, but maybe he only worked for like $1 for that year, and he encouraged many other high up executives in Nintendo, including Miyamoto, to do the same thing, and they did as well, so that way no one was laid off. Because let's face it, when your company is not profitable, it's generally not the worker's fault. It's decisions made at that upper CEO, COO level. So when the company screws up and is not making money anymore, you lay off employees, which I've always, yes, you have to run a business and you have to make money to keep a business. But at the same time, with some of the salaries these CEOs make for these companies, it's like you can take a pay cut. You don't have to fire anybody, because who knows? I don't know what. Let's say all these employees make $100,000. They don't, probably. I'm sure most of them probably make between like $40,000 and $70,000 a year. You take that number of money being made or being paid out to them, and then you look at like your executive salaries. I guarantee you those executives could take that pay cut for that year, and they don't have to lay off anybody. So, and I'm Mr. Capitalism. I'm all for capitalism. I'm all for markets and things like that. But I also think there should be accountability by those at the top. And if your business is failing, or if it's not turning a profit, you got to look inward at your executives and think, why? What happened? Like, what decisions were made that led us to this financial quagmire that we find ourselves in? So so the optics of the CEO of Bungie buying $2.3 million worth of cars when layoffs were announced is terrible. Like, again, it's his money, he can do what he wants with it, but you know, odds are it's stuff you did as a CEO that caused your company not to be profitable this year, and you have to do those layoffs. So just Nintendo's example, like, I wish more CEOs were like that. I mean, like, I've seen like CEOs get hired and they're making $50 million a year, which I'm not saying they're not worth that. I mean, companies will pay you what they think you're worth. So that's fine. They're making that kind of money. But as a CEO, if you're making $50 million a year, I'm sure you don't have too many debts, if you have any debts at all personally. You can take a pay cut so you don't either have to lay anyone off, or the layoffs are a lot fewer. So it's just one of those things. It's just sad that a bunch of people are losing their jobs from apparently poor business decisions made by the top brass at Bungie, who apparently are not taking any responsibility for it. And when I was watching Inside Games, and they were talking about that, and I think it was Lawrence who said, like, and they'll just fail upwards. They lose that job at Bungie, they'll be hired by another company as a CEO for probably the same salary, if not more. Which is kind of the sad thing. It's kind of like if I were a board member of a publicly traded company, I would not willingly want to bring on a new CEO of somebody who screwed up at their last company. You know, maybe hire from within. Maybe start promoting people up the chain. You know, from your lower management. Like bring them up. Like see what they can do because they've been in the trenches. They know how that works and things like that. Where a lot of CEOs were never in that trench, kind of thing like that. So it's a sad thing. Much like the Game Informer folks, I hope these Bungie people land on their feet. I mean, the video game industry is very healthy right now. There's probably not there's probably opportunity out there. So hopefully they find it and they land on their feet. They get a job. If at all possible, I'd work for one of those Japanese companies because apparently like Capcom and I can't think of anybody else kind of did something similar to Nintendo. Instead of firing employees, like pay cuts for the executives and things like that. So I mean, maybe find a job with one of those companies so that you don't get laid off when executives make stupid decisions that cost the company money. So that's my thoughts on all those things. Again, I hope these people find new work and they find it quickly. And shoot, sometimes layoffs are a blessing in disguise because any one of us, we get very comfortable in our jobs, especially when the job becomes easy. And not saying that your job is easy, but because you've been doing it for so long, it's second nature to you. So even when it's crunch time, and I don't necessarily mean crunch as getting a video game out the door because we said it's going to be released these days. I actually mean crunch time as in it's hectic, it's busy, kind of thing like that overall. You just kind of do it because you're used to doing it. It's second nature to you at this point. We become complacent because we enjoy the salary we make, and the job is second nature to us, where we could go out and find a new job and make a lot more money, and probably it'd be a lot easier of a job overall for us. There's been studies done on that when like factories close or move like overseas for cheaper labor, like people who worked in those factories never thought about looking for another job, but when they were forced to, they found easier work that paid them more money. So hopefully that happens to these employees too, because they probably enjoyed working at Bungie and things like that. They didn't want to leave, but now that they're forced out, that they will actually find that their value, their worth is actually more than what they were getting paid at Bungie. So, maybe they'll find new work and they'll get paid a lot more, better benefits and things like that. I hope that works out for them because that's what happens sometimes with layoffs. We get comfortable in our jobs. We don't want to look for another job, so we don't. Even though we probably could be making more money, have better benefits, easier work schedule, things like that. So hopefully this is the case for most of them. Most of them find better jobs that are more fulfilling to them and pay them a little bit extra. So good luck to all of them. And as usual, thank you all for watching. If you want to hit that like, you want to hit the subscribe button, definitely appreciate it. Other than that, you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Take care.